A case is also presumed to be work-related if that event or the exposure is a discernible cause of the injury. In other words, a significant aggravation maybe to a pre-existing injury. So in other words, it doesn't have to be the sole reason for the injury. It just can have added or caused part of the problem. It just doesn't have, and it doesn't have to be that sole reason either. There are exceptions to this rule, however, in the fact that there are some things that are exempted in this process. Anything that you guys fix. Don't you love this time of year? How many potlucks have you guys had already this year? Isn't that great? All the different foods that come in and stuff. Well, you know, the thing is that even though somebody fixed this at home, brought it to work and people get sick off of it, that's not work-related. Although you would think so, but it's not work-related as far as what OSHA is considering. Drinking, making anything to drink at work, making your coffee or anything else like that and drinking at work, and you haven't washed your cup out in 3 years and you get sick, that's not work-related, okay? Now, there are some exceptions to this rule, too. If you have someone that enjoys their coffee, but they're a mechanic, and they go out into the work area and you got metal and everything else that contaminates it because they don't have a cover on their coffee lid, and they get sick from it, that's work-related, okay? Because they were working in a toxic environment and it contaminated what they were eating or drinking, okay? I've been there myself. I was a mechanic, worked for a guy one time, and you couldn't ever take a break. And there was a sandwich shop next door, and the guy always used to send his kid over for sandwiches and stuff. And so he sent his kid over, and I ordered a sandwich, and it was on white bread. And the boss never let me take a break. So, I mean, you know, this is mechanics. You wipe your hands the best you can, and you eat. And pretty soon the bread's black, right? And the guy comes over, the sandwich shop guy comes over, and he takes a look, and he goes, "What did you do to the sandwich?" Well, if you're hungry and you can't stop you're going to eat what you eat. And that, again, that goes with the guy thing. We'll eat anything, right? So you have to be careful about that kind of stuff. How about common colds and flus? Tom over here is a dedicated so-and-so, and he comes into the office, and all he does is, man, he's coughing and he's hacking. He's on his deathbed, but man, he's dedicated, so he's in there, and I'm having to work next to the slug all day, right? You know what happens. The next day, guess who's got the cold? Who's hacking and coughing, right? Even though I know I got it from Tom and I got it at work, that's not work-related. As long as it's voluntary, it's not covered. Now, if you work for a fire department or a police department and they say, hey, we want you in the best shape possible, so therefore we want you working out, now that you're mandatory having to participate in a program, guess what? Now it's recordable. It's work-related, okay? Personal grooming or self-medication, same thing. Even though I take my medication at work and it makes me sick, that doesn't make it work-related. Be careful with some of those medicine cabinets that you may have at work. If somebody takes something out of there, generally that would not be considered work-related. However, if the boss goes to the cabinet and pulls out this stuff and gives them a couple aspirin and that kind of thing, that, again, different situations, be careful how those things are handled, okay? Personal grooming items, if you're in the bathroom spraying your hair down or something like that and you hit yourself in the eyes, that is not work-related, all right? So there's just different ways of looking at this. So what we're actually tracking when we do the OSHA recording, we're looking at death, days away from work, restricted or transferred activity. So if you have a good return to work program, that still is going to be recordable. Medical treatment above and beyond first aid. So let's talk about that here in a minute. Loss of consciousness. So something happens, get hit in the head or something like that, and they black out. That's now recordable. Or if you have a healthcare professional that diagnoses a significant injury or illness and says, yes, this is work-related, it is now work-related. So let's talk about that real quick. If you guys go to the back of your book there, and you go into that section and you just go 3 pages in. If I'd been smarter, I would have known. Those temporary immobilization devices, so someone passes out in the class and hits their head. We call 911, we come in and they put you on that board and they put that device around your neck to keep your head from moving around and things like that. That's considered first aid. That's not above and beyond, okay? Using eye patches is first aid. whatever you would use to clean out the eyes, unless they're doing actual kind of surgery or something like that. As long as they're just swabbing stuff out or something along those lines, it's considered first aid. Using finger guards, massages, drinking fluids to relieve heat stress, that's all considered first aid. Now, there's one on here, and every time we cover this, I still have the same issue. But I'm sorry, if I smack my thumb with a hammer and I get a blood blister underneath the nail, and I go into the doctor and he pulls out a drill to relieve the pressure, in my book, that's above and beyond first aid, but not according to what OSHA considers first aid. But if they're doing that, I'm a little nervous, to be honest with you. All right. That seems like that's a little above the cause there, if you will. Okay? So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at this. Also, the document, all this requires that you have process in place. In other words, you should have a way of having your employees report injuries and illnesses to you. So you want to put that in writing. You want to have this a policy that's actually in place and it's enforced. All right? You want people to be reporting those things to you. Employees are prohibited from, again, discriminating against an employee for either reporting or having the injury in the first place. Now, again, you can get after them. You can certainly say, hey, we had this rule. You were supposed to be using personal protective equipment. You're supposed to be wearing gloves. You weren't. You cut yourself with a utility knife. Now we have an issue here, right? So there are some things that in the practice aspect that you just can't discipline them or discriminate against them because they reported an injury, okay? Employee representatives can have access to certain information, but private information, they're not supposed to have access to. So you redact certain information. Say you work in an environment where you have a union, they have a representative that wants to come in and take a look at things. They can see certain information. They just can't see names, social security numbers, those kind of things, okay?